What's up, you beautiful chuds, and welcome to the Let's Talk Horror channel, and welcome to the Creep Zone, where we have very honest, very unrated conversations about something from the world of horror. On this episode, we are talking. I did this recently, actually, on like a previous episode where it was like, what was the fucking movie? Chopping Mall. Recently, I mean, that episode will already be out, so if you like Chopping Mall, go and enjoy that. But this is the type of movie that, for me, there's a lot of reasons as to why I shouldn't like this movie. And this movie is Dog Soldiers. And I'm going to go into why. Because this is one of those movies that generally can be quite difficult for me to watch, and basically it's my own fucking fault that I struggle with them. But the thing that makes this movie good is exactly what we're going to get into, and this is why it ends up being a movie that I absolutely love, very much like Chopping Mall. I should fucking hate Chopping Mall, but I don't. I bloody love it. The same with Dog Soldiers. So we're going to have a good old conversation about this movie. But with me, as on this episode today, my guest, I have Leighton with me. Leighton, also himself, he has a podcast. It is called the Surviving Horror Podcast. Probably the wrong name, but that's right, isn't it? I've got that right.
Yeah,
At
that's
least.
right. Yeah. Thanks for having me.
Oh
Real
no,
pleasure to be on, BP.
absolutely, I'm very happy to have you on. I was going to, I try not to mention, but basically I was going to mention, but Leighton actually listens to the show, one of the very few people that listens to the show. So it's lovely to have him on the show, talking about, we're going to talk about his podcast as well. But yeah, it's weird to have somebody, this is where you're going to realize how shit this is. And then, and then you're going to go, I'm never listening to it ever again. But obviously, I do thank you for listening to it. But yeah, when you sent over to your list and Dog Soldiers was on it, then I did realise, do you know what? Like, it's about time that I really deep dive into sort of a British movie, that, as I said, I should probably not like in my brain, but I do. The movie was released in 2002, a bloody long time ago now, even though like the early 2000s still feels like it's about like a couple of weeks ago for me. It is directed by Neil Marshall. Now, actually, this would be quite interesting to know. So Neil Marshall, he made this. He made another very good movie called The Descent. Then he's made a load of really shit movies. With yourself, which do you prefer? Now, obviously, we're going to talk all about Dog Soldiers anyway, but do you prefer Dog Soldiers over The Descent? Because a lot of people always never really know.
Yeah, it's a tricky one. I like them both. And Dog Soldiers is very male focused, all the male characters, and then Megan, and then Descent is obviously that all female cast going into the cave. I'd struggle to choose between them. I think I might just edge Descent as my preferred one, but I like the kind of army vibes of Dog Soldiers.
Yeah, what's great is that they are two very different movies and sort of actually showed like him as a director, I think, like his strengths. Like it went from this, and I think he then definitely like showed there was more strength to his filmmaking in The Descent. And I would probably say I'm the same with you as well. Maybe we should have done The Descent. Oh well, fuck it, it's too late now.
Maybe next time.
Maybe next time. That's it. Yeah, we just do Neil Marshall movies, and it just consists of Dog Soldiers and The Descent, and never anymore. Because I have tried watching his other movies, and I mean, he did a newer one, and I can't even remember what it's called, but I remember it was shit. And I tried
It was
watching
the
it.
Lair, and
Yeah,
it wasn't
there we
very
go.
good. Bless him.
See, you knew exactly what I meant. But yeah, that didn't go well. But you never know. We might get a sequel to this. We're never getting a sequel to this. This film is starring Sean Pertwee, Kevin McKidd, Emma Cleesby, Liam Cunningham, and there's loads. I've stopped there because there's just loads. Because otherwise we'd be here forever. But obviously Sean Pertwee. Sean Pertwee, would you say he's probably the most recognisable one out of the cast, I would probably say.
Yeah, I think so. He's done a lot of things before and then after. Kevin McKidd was in Trainspotting, wasn't he? But yeah,
That's
Sean
right.
Pertwee's the name on the poster. Really.
Yeah, absolutely. Like the draw that nobody knows who the draw is still, but yeah, they're like Sean Pertwee. I'm pretty sure he's one of those people that like you don't know him by name, but you do know him by face. You're like, oh yeah, he's in this.
Yeah.
On IMDb, it is 6.8, and then on Rotten Tomatoes, for all of you that need that to survive and watch movies, it is 82%, which is still obviously really high for this sort of movie. It's not one that I would have thought to be that high on Rotten Tomatoes still, but I'm glad that it is. Because irrelevant of everything that I say, obviously it's still a very good movie, even once I get into why I should hate this movie. Google synopsis wise, now the Google synopsis for some reason for this movie was literally like an essay. So I have basically made my own. So this is my own shit Google synopsis. But a group of soldiers out on a training mission. Basically, that training mission turns into a full-on werewolf war in a fight to stay alive and try to make it to dawn without becoming dog food. Basically, I made my own shit Google synopsis, and it's probably worse than anything they've ever done. So there we go. One thing that obviously I always like to ask my guests first: can you remember when you first saw Dog Soldiers?
I know I went when it came out. I remember seeing the poster back in just finished uni, early 2000s, and there's like a soldier with a werewolf silhouette behind him.
Yes.
6 soldiers, full moon, no chance. I thought I'll go and see that. That looks good. Didn't really know anything about it, but yeah, went and saw it when it first came out.
Yeah, this is where my brain sometimes it just doesn't work, because I know that I got this on X rental VHS, and I remember the same poster that you said where he's standing there, and obviously you've got I think it's like the moon is lighting out the werewolf on the ground sort of thing. It's a really good poster, and obviously one of the things that draws you into the movie, like you did with yourself. But I'm still struggling, because in 2002 I would have been 16, 17. So I feel like I did see this at the cinema, but for some reason I think about the VHS big box more so, because I remember getting it on X rental with when Blockbuster were doing the 3 for 20 deals and stuff, and I would go in there and get 3 movies for 20 quid, and they were always before they actually officially came out on VHS and so on. But yeah, good times. But yeah, I remember the VHS, but I feel like I did see it at the cinema. I definitely saw The Descent. I remember that much, because I nearly got kicked out of the cinema watching The Descent, because unfortunately my reflexes for anything that's gross and stuff happen. Normal people, they're be sick or something like that. Whereas with me, I just laugh at everything. I think everything's hilarious. And there's the bit in The Descent where she falls off and her leg snaps and you can see the bone come out, and everybody's sitting there trying not to puke, and I'm laughing my head off like I've just watched a Richard Pryor stand up. And they're somebody came over to me and they were like, "Yeah, can you keep it down a bit? You're laughing too loud at a horror movie." And I was like, "Oh, fuck off."
Yeah, I don't really remember the screening of Dog Soldiers I went to, but I do remember going to The Descent, because the friend I went with, he's terrified of, he's got claustrophobia. And so the bits before the monster, when it's just caving, he was like, "I need to go, I can't cope with this." The scariest thing ever for him.
Yeah,
I remember that one.
Yeah, yeah. That's weird, isn't it? Yeah, you certain things you remember, certain things you don't. I just remember laughing at bones coming out legs, and that's how my brain works. So this movie, look, let's just fucking get into talking about the movie. So the first, do you know what? I'm gonna get out the way straight away in regards to why I should not like this movie. Now, as you can tell, we're actually both, and for once, I've actually got an English guest on my show, or a British guest on my show. Normally, on my show, a lot of people, anybody knows that, they're all from across the pond. But I actually have somebody with me that's English, and this is obviously a British movie. There's a lot of different, people within the British Isles, in this movie, and so to speak. Neil Marshall himself is English. I think he's from up north. I think
he's from Newcastle. Yeah, he's from Newcastle.
That's right. Yeah. So it's a very English movie. So with me, I hate. I say hate is a strong word. I struggle with British movies. And the reason I struggle with British movies is because I don't feel like we're actors when we're in movies making British movies, because it feels more like a stage play. And I have ever since I was a kid. I have found British movies very difficult to watch, even though I'm literally English and as common as they bloody come. But I struggle so much because I get taken so much out of it. You know, it's like when I try and watch a Ewan McGregor movie and stuff, and I'm like, I can't fucking watch it because it's just nothing ever feels real. You know, they always feel like the characters they're playing. They always, you know, and everything is hyper stylized in regards to performance, especially in something like Dog Soldiers. And they always have to go work towards the specificities of what it is to be English. So you've got like in this, a lot of the script is on one of these around like this guy who's talking about England versus Germany, you know, and it's football this and football that, and I hate it. I truly hate it. Like they never set up any cool people in England or in the British in movies. We're either villains or we're like thugs that love football. Um, so I really struggle with British movies with British cast, and I think that might be one of the reasons why The Descent works quite well because I think there's a few American cast in that I think as well. So it's
Yeah,
a
and so
good.
I think some European, some of the girls are Scandinavian or something as well, aren't they? Yeah.
Yeah. So it's I think it works more as a Hollywood movie, which I'll get into about this because that's what turns me back around to this movie. But yeah, so that is my struggle with when I first watched Dog Soldiers. I was like, I don't know if I can handle this because I'm watching the most annoying people like me in a movie, and I never feel connected to the characters because they don't feel real. Does that make any sense? Do you understand? I mean, you'll probably feel completely different to me. You might love it.
I do feel different. For me, it was, and you talk about like character development and characterization a lot, and this could have, for my money, could have just been like six generic soldiers, and we're waiting for them to get killed one every 15 minutes or whatever. But it felt like a bunch of northern soldiers. It did feel very British. It felt very British Army. It felt like the kind of before in the cinema when they put join the army adverts up. It felt a bit like one of those, you
Yeah,
know.
it does a bit.
Um,
Yeah,
but yeah, you get for me, you get the sense of these lads know one another. They know each other's partners. They go to the pub when they've finished their training, and they're chatting about football and blokey army British stuff. So I quite liked it in that sense, and I only really knew Sean Pertwee as the lead. I mean, yeah, Kevin McKidd's been in Trainspotting, but I didn't really know him, and so the others were just kind of ensemble actors really who'd come in to join that troupe. So I quite liked it in that sense of they had a bit of a journey to them as well.
yeah. I think it's purely. I do have to specify because other people are going to be like, "You hate British people," sort of. But I think it's basically. I think it's purely just the vocal tone of the English voice when it's in movies. I think that's what it is because I do agree with you in regards to apart from the football bloke who's just like as English as you can come, but Sean Pertwee is very good in this. Kevin McKidd is very good in this. Is that his name? Kevin? I don't fucking know.
Yeah, yeah,
But yeah, but I think they're all. I think they are very good in this. I think, and I really do agree with you as well. I think they do a good job of making you feel that they are part of a team and making you feel like they are actually doing the job that we're on screen, you know, we're on the journey with them. It does a very good job at that. I just think it's just English people and the way that they sound on screen. I think that's what always takes me out of it. And maybe it's just because when I was a kid, like I didn't watch British TV when I grew up, like when I was a kid, you know, because I couldn't, I'm not, once again, I'm not a big fan of British TV, you know, like a lot of people over here, you know, love things like 40 Towers and Blackadder and Only Fools and Horses, you know, things like that, whereas I can't stand them. So I watched, when I was younger, I was watching a lot of, you know, American programs and a lot of American stand up and stuff like that. So my youth growing up was very like Americanized. So maybe that's why I really struggle with watching British people in movies. But still to this day, I'm the same. If I watch movies and it's got British people in it, I'm like, oh, I don't know if I can do it. I'll just go and watch, you know, American people do it better for somehow. Even though they keep on getting us to go and play like, you know, the Southerners over there, and you're like, just use people from your own country.
yeah, yeah. I mean, the baddie, the captain in the special forces, he's I think he's Irish, but he puts on a really hammy English villain type vibe, doesn't he? And
Yeah.
that is exactly what you're saying. The baddie for the piece.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. What it feels like is that you could easily transfer this to a stage and it would still work the same way. And I think that's what I always have a big problem with, is that sort of like there's the different types of acting and film, TV, and stage acting. And British acting feels very thespian, I think, is like, so to speak. But there is
We've all been to
definitely,
RADA, darling. It's that
yeah,
kind of thing, isn't it?
yeah, exactly.
All
Yeah.
the lovies pretending
Yeah.
to be soldiers.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's it. Because that guy who talks about Germany and English football has probably never seen a football game in his life. And also, there's one of the weird fucking things is that they keep on referring to him as big man, like as if he's like the big guy, and he's smaller than most of the other ones. And I always found that really weird. I was like, maybe they cast somebody else first, and they could proper that's why they're talking about football all the time. Maybe they hired somebody who's like a big guy. And then he pulled out, and they were like, "Oh shit! Now we've only got like this guy down here. Just shave his head, and then he look a little bit more like a thug." But like, it was weird. Like 2 or 3 times they talked to him like, "Oh, the big man over there," and then like Kevin McKidd is next to him, and he's way bigger than him. And I'm confused. Unless it's like one of those things where like he's, they're taking the piss out of him, so to speak. I don't know, but that doesn't really come across in the movie. You just think that he's like a double R bastard, but he could probably lose the fight to all of them, especially werewolves. But one of the things, so yeah, that's why I should hate this movie. But we're going to go into every reason as to why I don't hate this movie, and I really like this movie, which was a very big surprise to me. So, but one of the great things that I do like about this movie is that we get right into it. There is no edging your way into this movie. It is very, very much like an opening of a Friday the 13th movie where you've got these two people, a boyfriend and girlfriend or husband and wife, whatever they are. They're just basically they're out camping. They're going to have a game of sex. But they don't get quite that far because immediately, probably it feels like it's probably like 2 minutes, 3 minutes into the movie, and straight away they're gone. They're killed. They're mauled by these werewolf things. And then straight away, I mean, I love that because then you're like, oh, okay, for one, you're straight into it. You're not, pussyfooting around, but also, that they're fully aware of like a short run time, and they're like fucking get into it so we can get the ball rolling as well. Because obviously throughout this movie there are moments where it's all about the expedition and all about the story and trying to put a little bit of like lore in there and all that sort of stuff. And then that's a bit when you like start nodding off and stuff, or but it's not too bad, I suppose.
Yeah, I really liked it. It feels like it opens almost with a short, doesn't it? Like before the title card,
Yeah.
Dog Soldiers, you've got this couple. Okay, they set up. It's a solid silver letter opener that I've got you as a present.
Yeah.
But other than that kind of clumsy thing, it just felt like a little 2 minute short. Get attacked, get eaten by werewolves, dog soldiers. Here we go. And it's a nice opener.
Yeah, that's it. And also, you reminded me of how pathetic that fucking little silver letter opener was. Like, you expect it to be, especially when throughout the movie and like when it starts going to house, you've got that giant fucking Excalibur sword that they're constantly using. And in the end, like, imagine if the end was just a giant, massive sword fight. You know what I mean? With these werewolves, and instead he's got a little fucking letter opener. Then. Oh, I don't know. But maybe once again, you never know. It could be written in there for the joke side of it. I don't know. But you're exactly right. It does feel like a little short where you're like, this is, and then you get straight into the movie, so to speak. And we do because someone straight into the movie is on the run. But it turns out that he's just a super army soldier. And what I like about this is once again, they're not wasting runtime because it's this scene is essentially basically the opening scene is like werewolves. This is the movie. The second scene is this is your good guy and this is your bad guy, and that is what I like as well. You've got the guy. I think he's what did you say? I think it's Ryan. Was it that he the bad guy? So he
he's
sets
the
it up. Yeah, basically they establish that he's the bad guy because he shoots a dog. and the other guy's a good guy because he won't shoot a dog. And obviously we all like hurry up and die, Ryan, because you shot a dog, and you can't do that. And we know you can't do that. You can't hurt dogs in movies. But yeah, he's obviously a dick. But once again, I really like the fact that we're already set up, ready to go within like 5 minutes of the movie. It's just like, here we are. This is what's going to happen in this movie, and I do really like that. And then we fast forward a little bit. I think we fast forward like about a month or so, and basically we're with the team again, and straight away I couldn't remember if you saw him. No, you do see him in it as well, but basically Kevin McKidd, who's at the start, who's the one that doesn't shoot the dog, who's basically our good guy, he's back but with another team, and that's with his Sarge, Sean Pertwee, and all this other group of people that I do find incredibly annoying, but at the same time, as you were saying, and rightly so, they do feel like they're part of an established team. They work well. They do feel like they are soldiers. They feel like, they probably, I don't know if they did, but it feels like they might have gone through some sort of training for the movie. If not, then they bloody did a bloody good job. I don't know if they did any training, but they did all right.
Yeah, the bit I found out about them was he shot it in kind of consecutive scenes. So as the characters were dying off, bye-bye, actor, you're off the project. And so that sense of kind of camaraderie that you might get in the military, by the end, the 2 or 3 lads who are still filming, I guess that would be something for their performance as they get towards the end. But yeah, it certainly felt like that, didn't it? That they knew one another.
Yeah, and that's interesting as well. You said that because I didn't know that it was all like filmed chronologically. Because what's great about that, and that you find that a lot when it comes to like low budget movies and stuff, like the lower budget movies, because where you don't have the money to do everything you want, the advantage of shooting like chronologically is you obviously know where you are with the story, but also like you're saying, the characters know where they are with it, and you can sort of work along it that way. But when it comes to big movies, they don't have like a lot of the time the luxuries. It's a rarity if you get to shoot in order and in chronological order when it comes to a movie. So the fact that they did that for this movie makes sense in regards to it on a budget level, but also it makes sense to it in regards to like the story, like you're saying, with the characters and stuff. One thing I do want to talk about when it comes to the budget is the aesthetical style of this movie is fucking wild. And what I mean by that is that there's the up moments and then there's the down moments. And then you've got, this is because of how much of a low budget you've got. But then also you're like, this might be because Neil Marshall maybe didn't know what the fuck he was doing on some points. But also like it all works out in the end. So this movie, what I find really interesting about this movie, and I pretty much forgot about it until I was watching it the other night, is how this movie looks like a 70s grindhouse movie. Like it's shot on like 16mm, like a super 16mm camera. So it's crazy grainy, this movie, and it's obviously purposely set to be like that. Like obviously they had better cameras in 2002, so whether you have a smaller budget or not. So it's really interesting to me when you look at this movie, because it's definitely a decision that Neil Marshall made to shoot this on that sort of style of camera, because it's like, it does feel like very like grindhouse Tarantino sort of thing, you know what I mean? I don't know if you noticed that, but that's something that I saw.
I think there's a couple of things going on, aren't there? So there's the start where it's all about soldiers, like I said, feels like that sort of recruitment videos we get for the armed forces. And then the back end feels a bit like a mixture of Evil Dead and Zulu and Siege, Assault on Precinct 13, all quite exactly what you're saying. So even though it's a film of kind of 2 halves, pre-werewolf and post, that fits perfectly, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's a weird. It always throws me off because of the type of movie it is, and I'll get into that as well. It almost feels like it should look more polished than what it does. Like it should look more Hollywood than what it does, but it doesn't. It looks like shit, but but in a good way. Apart from the bits where it's not in a good way, because there's a lot of bits in Dog Soldiers where The editing is awful in regards to like going from the different times during the day that they film scenes, and that really made me laugh when I was watching it because I was like, that looks awful. Like and you can tell as well that they're filming in different places. So there's like a scene nearer the start where somebody's running after someone, and the greenery is completely different every time they sort of turn around. So then, like, one minute they're running and they're into the bushes, and the next thing they're in like a bit more of an open space. Or there's loads of times when they're filming during the day, so to speak, but then you could tell that it was getting later on in the day, and they were basically filming it rather than going, we'd come back the next day, because they probably couldn't for scheduling and budget. So they had to film anyway. So then you can tell that they've been like trying to lighten the image, and then you're like, oh no, don't do it that way. Like don't do it that way. But then sometimes you have to. So I would say aesthetically, this is a weird one, this movie, because you can tell that they went for something a little bit different looking because of the way, because of the camera. But also you can tell that they had like a very low budget and no time. So then they had to keep shooting when they shouldn't have kept shooting. And then we've got scenes in the movie that do not make sense in regards to lighting, editing. On a filmmaking standpoint, there's a lot of stuff that doesn't make any sense in this movie whatsoever. But oh well, it's a movie and they made it. So who gives a shit?
Yeah, a couple of million quid, isn't it? There is that thing with the lighting where the werewolves are coming out and it still looks like it's almost dusk, tea time, 6 o'clock, and there's not a full moon in the sky. And it's like, is this a story thing of the werewolves can do what they like, or is it just that we needed to get the shot before it went dark or something?
Yeah, exactly right. Yeah, and it's really interesting because movies like this, especially British ones, because obviously British movies as well. Once again, we don't get the budgets that Hollywood movies do. So even when you talk about independent movies, a British independent movie is something also completely different to what a standard independent movie is, because the budgets over here are still so little compared to what an independent movie would be in the US, in places like that, So the budget for this must have been really low, but I'll talk about the good things of what they did do with the budget later as well. But it is really interesting to me how this movie has two sides to it. It's meant to look a bit like shit purposely because of the cameras and the grindhouse sort of look, but it's also not meant to look like shit. But it does, because they can't do anything about it, and they're like, shit, we've got 4 scenes to film in one day, and the light's going down, so we're still going to have to do it. Oh, by the way, the werewolves can go around in the daytime. So yeah, it is a bit of here, there, and everywhere. But I suppose that's the sort of the charm of independent movies, so to speak, because you almost get, with movies like this, you almost get to see the process as you're watching it, and I find that really interesting and inspiring as well, but also really interesting, because there's limitations, because you can sit there and say like Neil Marshall should have done this and should have done that, but if you haven't got an extra day to film something, well, what can he do? So it's almost one of those things where it's kudos to him for doing what he did anyway. So yeah, that's what it is. But yeah, so basically from that point on, we're on the journey. They set the movie up quickly. There's werewolves. This is the good guy. This is the bad guy. These are the soldiers you're on this journey with. Even though they might be English and annoying, oh well, they're there. Then they sit around. They start telling campfire stories, very Friday the 13th-esque, but with soldiers. And then a giant fucking sheep monster thing. I don't know what the fuck it was. It's just a giant fucking thing. What I love about it, and I did have to laugh, they literally just chuck it in. Like, they're just like, there's no elegance to it whatsoever. They just chuck this giant sheep, ram, whatever, cow monster in. It scares the absolute shit out of them. And that bit, it really makes me laugh, because I'm just just the way that they chuck that fucking sheep thing in is just absolutely hilarious. But that's a good little scene as well, where you're telling the stories and then you get rudely abrupted by a giant sheep monster thing.
Yeah, it's a great jump scare, because I think one of the characters is in the middle of setting up a joke, so you're totally focused on the storytelling of a joke and where's this going, and then suddenly here you go, on the campfire is a massive cow, whatever it is, falling out of the
Yeah.
sky.
Yeah, I still undiscovered what sort of monster that is. I don't really know what it is because it's so fucking big. It looks like the world's biggest sheep, or they've dressed the cow up with wool or something like that, just giving it a coat to wear. And then this is also where we find out that the bad guy, the big bad of the movie, apart from the werewolves, Ryan, whatever his name is, they find him and he's been obviously cut up to shit. Because obviously he's been attacked by a werewolf, and you're like, that's annoying. He's not dead, but obviously there's a purpose for him in this movie. But so from this point onwards, really, the pace of it, I would say from that point onwards, even though the movie's been pretty quick pace, from that point onwards, it really is like quite like constantly. There's no sort of like from the campfire, you've got like the sheep monster that gets just chucked in by some bloke on set. They're just like, throw it as far as you can, and he does. And then we find Ryan, sort of thing. And then the team, obviously they find Ryan, and then the werewolves are after them for a bit. So then the team are on the run; they're being hunted. So the guy gets like a log in him. I think he does, doesn't he? Like where, like I mean, technically you can't class that as a werewolf kill because he gets a piece of wood for him, so that's his own fault.
Yeah, he's running away from the werewolves, isn't he? But not looking where he's going, which is a terrible mistake, and manages to impale himself right through the chest.
Absolutely. If anybody knows anything, if you're ever getting chased by a werewolf, which can happen, always look where you're going. There's your first mistake, especially if you're in the woods. But this is also the moment where Sarge, Sean Pertwee, he basically gets all fucked up. All of his sausages start falling out of him because he gets sliced by a werewolf. And you've got to give it to Sean Pertwee because he's so fucking funny in this, but he's not trying to be funny, if you get what I mean. Like it's just the way that he's reacting to his sausages falling out, his intestines are coming out of him, and he's laying there and they're all coming out of him. There's something really funny about the way that he reacts to everything in this movie. It's like, 1 to 100 on everything. You gotta fucking leave me. I'm gone. I'm done for. You go, and all that sort of stuff. Like,
And there's some really great chemistry with him and Kevin McKidd, isn't there? Of he's the medic, so he's trying to put his intestines back in, and he goes, "Oh, they won't fit." He goes, "Of course they will. They came out. They'll get." So there's a bit of banter despite werewolves and all your guts hanging out as well.
Yeah. I would say as well that I do actually think that this movie is actually quite. My problem is with the English sounding language, not with the writing of the movie. So I actually think that the writing of the movie is actually pretty good. It'd be interesting to know how much of it is ad-libbed, sort of, and on the fly and stuff like that, like how much Sean Pertwee and Kevin McKidd, like you said rightly, I think they've got very, very good chemistry. So it'd be interesting to see how much was, what was written on the page and what they said, and how much was ad-libbed at the time, so to speak. But they do a very good job at building like that relationship that they do really well in that. But they're both very funny together. But I do actually think that this movie is pretty well written. With not just the movie itself in regards to going like there's more to this movie than just like they're werewolves and this is what it is. Like there's an actual reason as to what it's happening, and it's like a I don't know, is it like a government thing or something like that,
They're trying to capture one, aren't they, for like their special weapons or something like that, some secret labs, and find out how to use werewolves in the army.
Yeah, basically the shit that never works in any movie ever, they're trying to do. But so there is more than just it being like there's werewolves, there's soldiers and stuff like that. So I actually would say the movie is pretty well written and they do a good job at writing the characters in it. As annoying as I think they are, they do a good job with it. And Kevin McKidd and Sean Pertwee are like at the the high level of that, so to speak, because they're two people that every time they're in this movie, they're on the screen together, you're like, something's going to happen and you're going to really like enjoy what happens, which happens a little bit later. But But yeah, then at that point, obviously they're on the run from these, these big giant fucking werewolves. But luckily, some lady in a jeep, she turns up at the right time. But then so they jump in the jeep. The werewolves, they give her a sunroof as well. With one of these big werewolf hands, and goes through the car. And off they go. After they go, then obviously night falls, and then they head off to shelter in a nice little cottage. So this lady lives in a nice little cottage, and then at that point you realise like that's where they're going to hunker down for the movie. That's predominantly where the rest of the runtime is probably going to take place. With it being obviously the low budget, you might as well make it a single location movie in a sense, and work your story, work your characters around them. But that doesn't mean that it's not good, and it doesn't mean that it's cheaper than it needs to be or looks or anything. It works very well for this type of movie because it becomes more about the character and their survival and so on. But yeah, they turn up at this cottage, and then at this point you get some talking, and that gets a little bit boring. But they're trying to, establish a little bit more of the lore, a little bit more understanding of like, oh, this is the shit that happens in it as well. But the werewolves themselves, they're not idiots. They're actually quite smart because they managed to cut the power. But then this is when obviously we get our sort of first in-house fight with the werewolves and the soldiers. I don't know if you're the same as me, but also once again, I don't know whether it's a deliberately written thing. But I say the werewolves are smart. But at the same time, and once again, I don't know whether it's to do with the on a movie perspective, but they keep on just like boarding up the house when they need to with like bits of wood that is not going to stop a fucking giant werewolf. And it keeps on happening throughout the movie where windows get broken and they try boarding it up, or a door gets broken, they're trying to board it up. And I'm like, these werewolves can literally come in whenever they want at any time. But it feels like for the purpose of the movie, they can't because a little piece of wood is above the door. But every time it really annoys the fuck out of me because you're just like, let these werewolves in.
Without that bit of wood, we don't get a film. They just storm in and kill them all. But it almost feels like the werewolves are kind of toying with them, isn't it? That they could, but they're going to play with you and try and pick you off and almost enjoying scaring these soldiers and kind of, playing around with them rather than just kind of dive in and eat them.
Yeah, you're right. It's there for the purpose of the movie because you're right. We wouldn't have a movie. We wouldn't have the rest of the movie if they go in and it'd just be a short movie, even shorter than the movie is. But you're right. Yeah, I think you're right. I didn't really think of it that much. I was too busy blinded by the fact that there's no way that they could just. I mean, they just smash through a piece of wood, But yeah, you're right. They probably are just sort of toying with them because they know they can go and do it, what they want at some point, and obviously they do at some point as well. But yeah, it's so at this point, it becomes about that sort of survival. We start losing like members of the team. Sean Pertwee is still got his, sausages. There's a really funny point as well where there's the dog of the woman is basically trying to pull. I think it's his bandages, but it's more funny if it's his guts. But basically the dog is pulling at Sean Pertwee's sausages and trying to pull them out, and it's just his reaction to it again is so funny. But it's a little bit of a moment in the movie where it's a gem of the part of the movie because there's so many movies like they don't have to add these little extra moments, but when they do, like they're the reasons why you remember like movies like Dog Soldiers and other movies because there's moments in them that you always like you don't forget, you always remember. And every time I think of Dog Soldiers, I always just think of like the little fucking dog is more vicious and scarier than the werewolves themselves because he can't escape these dogs.
Yeah, and you picked it up when you said sausages earlier. It made me smile because that's the line that sticks out later on when he goes, "Oh, sausages!" When I think they're gluing him back together or something.
Yeah,
and he's drunk on the bed or something.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's the scene as well. So that's the point where we that basically Sean Pertwee as well. Yeah, so he's basically like on the bed because he's obviously bleeding out. His sausages are sort of everywhere. They've got to do something. And yeah, he's basically getting absolutely like, you know, Jazzy Jeff. He's getting hammered, and they have to like glue his guts and everything like that back in. But it's just, once again, it's a hilarious scene. He gets him to knock him out, but obviously there's something that I'll say about that later as well. Some people who know Dog Soldiers will probably know that anyway, but it's a little bit of trivia about that scene. But also as well, within this movie as well, there's like a lot of moments where the female character, there's moments where you're like, is she like, there's a little bit more to her than just, you know, some lady that just lives in a cottage, you know, like there seems to be a little bit more to her. And they do explain like the odd little thing, like how she worked with Ryan and stuff like that. But I don't know, there's like the odd, you know, it's the movie thing, you know, every now and again they do the little things, like when she cuts her hand on the glass and she looks at it and you're like, oh, okay, there's more here, you know, there's more to her character, and they start developing it. And then your brain, when you're watching a movie, your brain starts going and go, okay, like where does she play a bigger part in this? Because she's going to, but how does she play a bigger part in this?
Yeah, and they feed us a little bit of that. So I remember thinking when we first see her, it is just a woman who picks them up. That you don't immediately go, oh, she's a baddie right from the
Yeah.
first time we see her. But then there are just little layers where you go, something's not right. And so you don't get this huge twist of like, I see dead people. You get, oh, okay, it's built up to what happens with her in the end as well. So
Yeah, and once again, it's another layer to, you know, good writing, good story structure, and so on like that. That once again, you know, with it being low budget and being the movie it is, you don't have to have that. But they're trying to create something with this movie, and that's one of the reasons why this movie is still, you know, like the cult classic that it is, because of those extra layers, those extra things that they're adding into the movie, so it adds that extra dimension into it, which is always nice. But they do make a plan at one point where they want to go and get this car basically that's in the barn. That goes as wrong as it can fucking go, because he gets into the to the barn, and what the werewolf is eating this guy's face, one of the soldiers or whoever it is. He's eating the absolute like fucking shit out of them, and it's everywhere. So I'm going to say something about that. There's things that are very impressive about this movie, and I would say like on a higher level than the rest of the movie. But I'm going to save that to the end because it's going to be pretty obvious what it is. But at the same time, I think that that's a big part of what the movie is. But yeah, so that all goes absolutely tits up. They don't do that. More boring stuff happens. We basically, this is the moment where you find out more, where essentially the soldiers are bait. That's pretty much what the soldiers are there for. They're there for this government experiment that they're trying to do to capture this, whatever it is, the werewolf thing, or figure it all out so they can use it as their own weapons. But these soldiers are essentially there as bait. And then obviously that, you know, that really pisses them right off, as it would do with anyone. But then what's his name? The Ryan at that point, he turns into a werewolf because obviously they've got this, you know, traditional werewolf sort of thing where they get bitten but they heal super quick and superhuman, so to speak. And he turns into a werewolf in like in one of those. It's a good transformation scene, but it's also an annoying one because like you don't see it.
yeah. There was no budget, was there? There was no
Exactly.
American Wolf in London. There was like Hammer Horror kind of cut away. Now you've got funny eyes. Cut away. Now you've got hands. Now get under the kitchen table and come back as it. And yeah, so it's what we don't see because they couldn't afford to show us anything.
Yeah, it was like the Thriller music video where you're right with the yellow eyes and stuff like that, and then you don't see necessarily the transformation so much until it happens, and then you're like, oh, there's a werewolf. But yeah, then you know, at that point, you know, they basically they're at this point they're trying to devise plans as to how they can get out of all this cottage and everything like that, you know, so they can be free of these werewolves. Cooper has another plan that's basically to blow the shit out of everything, which he does, and then there's some like proper macho slow man action running through fire. It obviously is absolutely badass. It looks great. But once again, it feels like something that sort of fails again. It almost feels like everything they try to do, even though it might look cool, It doesn't necessarily work out how they want it to throughout the movie. You know, it sort of has the adverse effect. But this is when we learn also that the woman, the female character in it, that I always forget her name, but she's a traitor basically, and she's one of them. Um, this always confuses me. Is she a werewolf, lady? I don't know, or is she just not? I don't really get it.
Yeah, so the thing that struck me this time when I watched it was not so much the good bad soldiers and the wells, but it's the family. And so what she is saying is she'd gone to investigate. I think she was a zoologist or something like that, and then stumbled across all this stuff. But that family who lived in that house, they were a family of werewolves, and that's for me the thing that came out this time I watched it. The stew that the soldiers come and eat is probably people, and so
Oh
the
yeah.
dead bodies in the cellar right at the end as well that they were probably keeping when they weren't werewolves, when they were people. So this family might just be like Texas Chainsaw Massacre family and happen to have bonus werewolf nights on the weekends as well. And she kind of ended up joining that when they'd infected her, or she'd not, they'd not fully eaten her and she'd turned or something. So yeah, she was part of that circle. We'll find out in the end, don't we?
Yeah, and also that's just made me like think about them having human stew now. Like now that's because I did think that as well. I was just like, where she is, and I'm like, oh, there's probably like a little local shop or something like that. But now I'm just can't help but thinking that they're probably just eating humans and have no idea about it and so on. But once again, like I keep saying throughout this, is that they're adding elements, they're adding layers into what the story is, what the structure is, and who the characters are, and so on. So what I like about it is that it's more straightforward. We've seen all the shit they put on Tubi and all that sort of stuff, and we've seen a zillion werewolf movies where they're just like they haven't got a clue what they're doing, or they don't like they're just like I literally watched one the other day, I think, called Werewolves, and it was awful. And but it was literally just like, let's just have some fucking badass looking werewolves do some cool shit and people will love it. And it makes you then go, yeah, but I might love that, but I also love characters, I love story, I love an idea, I love a concept. And that's what's good about Dog Soldiers, that irrelevant of how low budget it is, um there is a core concept, there is an idea. Like it's somebody, Neil Marshall, and that has actually written down and thought of an idea that's more than, oh, we're going to make a bloody good film about werewolves. Like there's reasons to everything, and I like that, rather than it just being like, here's some werewolves eating the shit out of people. As fun as that is, it's nice to have a little bit of like a background story and so on as well.
Yeah,
um
it doesn't feel one dimensional, does it? It doesn't feel like these are just generic soldiers, these are scary werewolves, this is a baddie. And you could just limp through 89 minutes and go, well, that was great. Let's never see that again. That kind of depth and different storylines going through. And even having watched it last week, picking up on that human stew and, the days when they're not running around howling at the moon, they're still baddies. There's a bit more going on, isn't there?
Yeah, yeah, you're right, and that's really good, and that's a testament to Neil Marshall and everybody like that was creating the idea of what Dog Soldiers is. But then from this point, it does the same thing that it does throughout the movie, where you have like the little moments where it's about the story and so on, and then it ramps it up to 10, and that's what I do love about this movie, is that it does just, well, it goes to 11. I would say this movie every time it goes to those lengths, because this is the point where they start actually coming into the house. They're having fist fights with werewolves, which is fucking stupid. Like, I mean, like, and it goes very English once again, and that's what makes me like not like it, because I'm like, oh, stop being so English. We get, what is it? I mean, I'm not even going to say that because that's like right at the end. But fucking hell, it's so English, and I'm like, stop being so English, please. And then, these werewolves are going around. Sean Pertwee is up because he's healed a little bit. His sausages are back inside of him. He's obviously slowly turning. And then basically, Kevin McKinney gets basically locked in the cellar thing where you're saying, where you've got all the bodies and stuff like that, but he's down there, and you think everything's going to be fine because obviously Sean Pertwee has basically blown everything up in a great explosion. I'll talk about that as well, but there's a great explosion. And yeah, Kevin McKidd, he's down there. You think he's probably going to be fine, but unfortunately, he's not, because he encounters Ryan. But but it don't matter, because he's got a little fucking little silver paper opener thing, envelope opener, and then obviously, these absolutely intimidating, monstrous werewolves. He kills him with this stupid little fucking thing that I hate. And that's it. Douchebag Ryan, he gets killed with this pretty little silver knife. And then that's pretty much the end of the movie, because we get the Predator ending, where he's standing there, the sole survivor. I'm surprised he didn't have a cigar, but he does say that shitty line of I don't even, I hate it so much, I don't even remember what it is. Isn't it like, I feel like it's like, they think it's all over, it is now, or whatever. It's something like that, isn't it?
Oh, yeah. It's something from the football, is't it?
Yeah,
something like that. I can't
it's
remember.
something like they think it's all over. It is now. It's about as English as you can get. I fucking hate it. But yeah, that is basically the end of the British werewolf massacre, and it works well. But the things that stand out to me really are, and it'd be interesting to see sort of little things, in-depth details that might stick out to yourself. For one of the main things for this movie is it is basically Predator with werewolves. That's what this movie is. It's like there are a group of soldiers that go into this place. There's werewolves, but there's not a predator. But they are essentially predators. And then it becomes a whole movie about survival. And then even at the end, he's standing there very Schwarzenegger, like, with the smoke and the fire and everything. You know what I mean? But I don't know whether part of me gets annoyed by the fact that it's so Predator. I talking about how it's well written and stuff like that, but at the same time, it leans heavily into literally being Predator, but with werewolves.
Yeah, you get the impression that Neil Marshall is a big film nerd, and there's lines that or little nods that he's given to lots of different things, bits of aliens, they've cut the power, and all this sort of stuff. So he's probably grabbed all his favorite bits and gone, I'm making a film, let's throw a few extra bits in there as well. I like the fact, like you say with Predator, that when we see through the eyes of the werewolves, we get that kind of black and white, really clear. Yeah. And then you've got the special forces with the green goggles, but it's nighttime, but the werewolves can see everything in black and white.
Yeah, it's very Predator-esque, but I think, I do get to, even when I was watching it the other night, I was like, oh, this is very fucking Predator-like, isn't it? It's like to the point where you're like, it's too much, and you're like, oh my God. But also, it doesn't help that you've got a crazy Predator-like soundtrack as well. Like, it's almost like, dun, 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 dun. You know what I mean? Like, it's a very action-orientated soundtrack. But I think that leads into what the reason that why this movie works for me, and I think what Neil Marshall purposely did with this movie is that even though it is very English or very British, obviously there's, it's not essentially English. There's a lot of people that's Scottish and stuff in it as well. I think it's supposed to be set around the Scottish Highlands. I think possibly. I could be wrong.
Yeah, it's up in Scotland, isn't it? Where it's happening.
Yeah, that's it. But this film is like unapologetically, British, and so to speak. But the movie being like Predator, I think Neil Marshall definitely tried making a British Hollywood movie, if that makes sense. Like, this is, I think one of the things I love about this movie is that in 2000 and whatever this came out, 2001, 2002, we weren't in English movies weren't like this. And I think that that's why this movie stood out a lot. This was a very unique British movie. Do you think that? Like, I at the time, yeah. I don't think that there was too much around that stood out from, like, that wasn't British, but also trying to be Hollywood,
Most of what we were doing in the sort of late 90s, early 90s was still Hugh Grant, Four Weddings, Love Actually type. That's what we were as Brits, was it? Lots of romantic comedies and things. No one was really doing much British horror. And we've got all Hammer and everything from back in the 60s and 70s, and we'd kind of just stopped. So any horror was coming over from the States, wasn't it?
Yeah, that's right. And I think what's interesting about this movie is, I think that's why it works so well. And I think the popularity of this movie was so big, because especially obviously in this country and stuff, and in Britain, and obviously that's what made it commercially successful in a way, not in regards to the cinema stuff, because I'll talk about that as well, but in regards to it, like there's a lot of people stateside and so on that love this movie. And there's a lot of people that I speak to. I mean, I think I've done a guest spot on somebody else's show speaking about Dog Soldiers, who's in the US, and they love this movie. And I think it's because it's a good combination of it being a British movie that feels very Americanized. And I think that that's definitely a purposeful decision that Neil Marshall made, was like, I want to try and make something that doesn't feel British, even though it's very, very British. I think he does a really good job at it.
I think he's about our sort of age, a little bit older than us, but he's clearly grown up on those sorts of Aliens, Predator, American cowboy movies, Evil Dead. There's a little flavour of a lot of those things right through his filmmaking, isn't there? So yeah, clearly he's got lots of American nods, which have worked out really nicely for him.
Yeah, absolutely. But I think the biggest thing for me, and it'd be interesting to see what you think about this as well. But one, before I get into like the big part of that, is the practical effects in this obviously are very, very good. They're really good. Like when this film gets like gory and bloody and goes gnarly, like it really does it. Obviously like with the guts all coming out. But there's the scene that I always absolutely love in regards to how it looks, and it is the bit in the barn where the guy's going to get the car, and then he looks around, and then there's the werewolf eating that guy's face, and then he eats it, and and he pulls the guy's head off and stuff like that. That's one of the moments in the movie where, like, there's always moments in certain movies, and movies that are actually good. If they're shit, then they're not. But with this movie being good, there's always the moments that I always remember, because they're always like movies that I really enjoy looking. Those moments that I really enjoy, and I look forward to them happening because the practical effects at that moment and throughout the moment are very, very good. I think that's obviously something that British, they've always been very good at practical effects, and I think they do a very good job at showing that in this movie. But that's a scene that stands out to me in regards to like really good practical effects where it's working very well with the werewolves, but also it looks fucking gross. There's some really good.
There are lots of those bits that I thought were great. Or anytime there's blood and guts, like say, it looks really good. It doesn't look really cheap and naff. It looks like something Savini and Nicotero and stuff would knock out with a lot more money. And even the things that aren't so much a kind of big bloody effect. Right at the end, the werewolf's got a sword stuck through him. It's going in his teeth.
Yeah.
I know it's really horrible, but as a nice effect of this thing that just feels really icky, and it's not sausages. It's just a sword in your mouth.
Yeah. It goes to, once again, it feels different. This movie doesn't feel like a British movie, and that's what I think is like the lasting power of this movie. And I think that that's to a really good testament to Neil Marshall and everybody who's creating it. Just how it doesn't feel so British that I can't watch it. But I can watch it, and then I really enjoy it. But the big thing for me, now it'd be interesting to see what you think as well, but I still think to this day, these are the best representation of werewolves on screen. Now, you might think differently. Obviously, American Werewolf in London, the transformation scene is just purely iconic. And obviously, American Werewolf in London, yes, I do love that movie more than I love Dog Soldiers. But also, I do love how the werewolf looks in American Werewolf in London, but we also don't see it that much. It's very hidden, and a lot of it is because they hated it. So they're like, or they didn't necessarily like how it looked so much on camera, so they didn't really show it so much. But I do love it. But I think we've had a lot since then and different variations of werewolves and stuff like that. But there is something to the werewolves in this that feel otherworldly, but still part of this world. Like you feel like what you're watching is a living, breathing, actual physical representation of a werewolf. They're giant, they're scary, they are intimidating. The look of them, like, just looks like the hair is so good. Their faces, the way that they snarl, like the animatronics or whatever in there, in the masks that they're wearing. I still to this day think that they're probably my favorite representation of werewolves on screen. But I'd be interested to know if you've got other ones that you think are better.
I would agree. I would say, yeah, for sure. Werewolf in London, best werewolf movie. Let's not even worry about that.
Yeah.
Dog Soldiers is not going to touch that one. But the werewolves in this look great, and they look big and scary, and they look like they're 8 feet tall, and they look like they've got kind of wolf dog heads, and then quite human bodies with exaggerated bits, and all of that is quite scary in itself. And I think he used dancers rather than actors who were doing kind of really lots of body movement, and then put them on stilts to make them even bigger. So they do move in a really kind of otherworldly way as well, much more than just like stick a dog on the set or stick a
Yeah.
guy with a funny mask on and run around like Oliver Reed back in the day kind of stuff. So the way they move is really intimidating for sure.
Yeah, you're exactly right. And I think that's obviously the main word with them is that if you are, that's like why, Michael Myers is literally just a guy with a mask, with a knife. But there's this intimidation factor with Michael Myers. Like that's what makes him scary. There's something intimidating about just a guy in overalls. I mean, look, there he is behind me, you know what I mean? But there's something intimidating about that. That's why I don't look behind me. But there's something intimidating about that. And that is what I think is like very important to having no matter in what form it can be in horror. If you've got a villain that's intimidating, whether they're like 6 foot or 8 foot or whatever, I think that is something that if you nail that, then you have a very good start to creating some form of iconography in horror and so on. And I think you're exactly right. I think the way that the werewolves move, like they're so big that they're ducking, and the way that they move through doors, they do some great shots where the werewolves are walking, moving through the doors, and their arms going first, probably because the people in it couldn't fucking see anything, and they're trying to feel their way through. They're blind in these suits. And the way they move through the doors, and the way that they're so massive compared to the people that they're against, and then also on the story standpoint, it makes you go, as a viewer, well, how are they going to defeat these giant monsters? How are they going to defeat these? They can do literally anything they want to them because they are werewolves. They are giant fucking monsters, and they do a very good job at showing that on the screen in regards to the way that it's shot. But I do think the way that they look are still the best. They feel the most natural representation of what I think a werewolf in real life would look like. Does that make sense? Does that make sense? Yeah. That's what I
Yeah,
think
yeah.
werewolves will look like in this movie. And I think that's probably where they were probably going for. They're like, if humans were going to turn into a werewolf, what would it look like? And they're like this, although they probably grow 3 or 4 foot, maybe. But yeah. So I'm glad you agree with me. But yeah, it doesn't mean that it's the best werewolf movie. Not really by far, even though it's one of the best ones. But I think, yeah, absolutely 100%. These are the best, representation of werewolves. I love how vicious they are, how gnarly they are, how good it looks, the blood and everything like that. So there's definitely a lot of really good things to love about this movie. Is there any other things that stand out to you that I haven't or we haven't spoken about?
The thing I really like is the overkill from the soldiers, and it feels like a really real reaction. That if there's a werewolf, you're not just going to shoot it once and kind of put your gun down and run away. So when he's hitting one of them with a hammer at the door, and he hits it about 10 times, and when he stabs it, he doesn't stab it once; he stabs it about 30 times. And that sense of like controlled panic from the sons of it's
Yeah.
a bloody werewolf. I've got to shoot every bullet into it and hope that does something. So I really like that. In a lot of horror movies, it's kind of one hit and panic and run off, but these guys go for overkill and it still doesn't work. But better to punch him in the face and knock his tooth out than not try.
Yeah, exactly right. They do a good job of having that sort of like soldier and survivalist mentality of like they don't do the Hollywood one bullet shot, you know, apart from the stupid little fucking letter opener at the end, which I do hate. But apart from that, you're exactly right. You know, whenever one's trying to put their arm through the window, it's not as if they're trying to shake hands with it, you know, they're trying to cut his arm off and stuff like that, you know. So yeah, you're right. I think the aggressive nature of the movie from both parts, they do a really good job at showing that. But it is a very aggressive movie. It is a very violent movie. It is a very, like I said, I just love the fact that it does feel like an action movie and not a British action movie. You know, it just feels like an action movie. As much as I hate British things, you know, it doesn't feel like it's not. And that's why I think, also at the end, I did put The Descent is better, which we've already said, but just at the end, I just put The Descent is better. But I think that's just because, you know, it does feel more Hollywood, you know, like it does feel, you know, more Americanized, so to speak. But I think he does, with what Neil Marshall can do with this movie, I think he exceeded the expectations by a million times of what a British and in a low budget independent British movie at this time wasn't doing what this movie was. Like you were saying, it was all fucking Hugh Grant and love movies and all that sort of shit. And then, you know, this movie came out and it stood out. Especially obviously over here being the British movie that it is. And then obviously it didn't really transcend until, you know, a little bit later for the US where they started like, you know, learning what it was and so on. So it's an interesting journey this movie's been on, but I do like the fact that still it's a movie that is still spoken about, you know, like it's still referenced. Like we're speaking about it now in 2025, you know. I do like the fact that it's still up there considered to be one of the best werewolf movies. And I do think it deserves to be. Production info and facts. So in the scene where Wells asks Cooper to knock him out, so that's when Sean Pertwee's on the bed and they're trying to glue his sausages back in. Kevin McKidd, he throws a stage punch for the first time. And you can see this in the movie because the two punches do look very, very different. And also the second one, and I'll get into that, they do add a sound effect that's a little bit too late for a reason. Because in the second, because basically what happened is that in the second one, where he punches him, he actually punches him for real, and he actually punched Sean Pertwee in the face for real in the second punch. And that's why I think there's like basically they put a sound over it that sounded very much like the, you know, that sort of classic movie punch sound, because he probably sounded like, you know, if you've punched people in the face for real, you know what it really sounds like, not like the movie punches that they have. So yeah, but apparently Pertwee, it didn't bother him too much because apparently he was absolutely off his nut on that scene anyway, and the alcohol he's drinking is actually alcohol when he was drunk. It feels like he was probably drunk the entire movie.
A bit of method acting. Go on, let's really drink, and then you can really punch me.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But once again, it makes for a great scene because that is such a. Once again, Sean Pertwee in this is. I mean, we haven't really said it too much because I don't really. It's not really a big thing for me because in this movie, it's tough for me to talk about performances because I don't like them because they're British. But the performances themselves are good. But Sean Pertwee is like as good as Kevin McKidd is. Sean Pertwee is the star of this movie. You know, for me, it's just like every scene he's in, whether it's him being the Sarge doing sergeant things, or whether it's him, you know, trying to keep his sausages in. You know, like. You know, and getting drunk and everything he does, or saving the day, you know, just everything he does is turned up to 11 in this movie. Even the bit where he's fucking, you know, trying to save the day with the gas and everything. It's just the way he's doing it. But Sean Pertwee is the, you know, the MVP of this movie, as well as obviously how could the werewolves look. Some of the corpses hanging around in the basement were originally created for and used in Event Horizon in 1997, but actor Sean Pertwee was in that movie as well. So I don't know, maybe you recognise some of the corpses hanging around. Simon Pegg was offered a part in the movie, but turned it down after Edgar Wright asked him to save his first horror role for Shaun of the Dead. Obviously, he was working with Edgar Wright on Spaced, Obviously, an absolutely legendary, iconic British program. Once again, the reason that I can watch Spaced is because it's very Americanized. It's very sort of Hollywood, storytelling and the way that the movie looks. And we know Edgar Wright is one of those directors that paved the way, so to speak, for, once again, very similar to this movie, where it's British movies or British filmmakers thinking American, thinking like those Hollywood type movies and how they're made and how they're shot. And they felt so different to anything else that was British at the time. And obviously with Shaun of the Dead and everything he did. But it would have been, I don't know, it would have been a bit weird seeing Simon Pegg in this.
Well, I might be pinching your
yeah.
other trivia, but Jason Statham, I'd found, was down to take Kevin McKidd's role. So that could have been really different. We could have had Simon Pegg and Jason Statham doing their thing.
Funny
Totally
enough,
different film.
that's my next fact. Because
I've
Kevin
stolen
McKidd, no, it's all right. But Kevin McKidd, Cooper, obviously, he broke his ribs on the first days, in some of the first days of shooting. But basically, he said nothing with the fear of getting replaced. But the pain got too much. Basically, he did. He ended up getting replaced by Jason Statham. But he had scheduling issues, so McKidd came back after he all healed up. But once again, it would have been weird seeing Jason. But then also, Jason Statham would have been really he would have suited this movie down to a T, wouldn't he? Like Jason Statham going, "Oh, come on," you know what I mean, doing Jason Statham films. As long as, luckily he wouldn't be doing his awful. I don't know if he did it in any more movies than the one movie he did it called The One, where that was the one with Jet Li. And that was a really early 2000s as well. But Jason Statham was in it. And I think it's probably the only time he's tried an American accent. And it was so fucking bad. I think even he knew, was like, no, I'm not doing that ever again. I will stick to being British. Even if I'm in an American movie, I'm never doing an American accent. The amount of time that I spent taking the piss out of him for that role. Good film, but shit performance. And one of the soldiers, of course, is called Bruce Campbell, and yes, it is for the reason that you think. If you don't know, I'm not going to tell you. You should know. And then and then the film, insanely, and this is what I was mentioning a little bit earlier, is that the film didn't get a theatrical release in the US. It did over here. But it actually got a premiere on the Sci-Fi Channel. And that's where anybody in the US, that's where they saw this movie for the first time, was on the Sci-Fi Channel, which obviously was a great channel in the early 2000s. They had a lot of great stuff on there. But yeah, so that's why this movie, it didn't really catch on straight away when it came to, going overseas and so on, because it didn't actually get a theatrical release. It did over here, but not over there. But luckily, that hasn't really stunted, the where this movie did, where this movie went. Somehow, even though it didn't get a theatrical release over in in America and that, it still is a movie that they've searched for, and they found, and they really, really enjoy it. So that's a great thing for this movie, because there's a lot to this movie that people can like. But talking about that, what are your overall thoughts on the movie? Obviously, we've discussed a lot of what we like and so on, but what are your overall thoughts?
I really like it, but it's not the kind of film that I would sit down and watch every weekend. And actually, I'd watched it recently before we said we would do this, and that must have been the first time in about 10 or 15 years. So it's one of those, a long time can pass, but then you put it back on, it's all very kind of reassuring and comfortable. I've watched it twice in the space of a month as a result. I really like the soldiers, and it doesn't feel like lads. It's not overly kind of macho. It just feels like a bunch of fairly normal soldiers, and that's what they do. And the fact that we get to kind of, for me, with horror movies, I always like to kind of follow the characters through the circumstance that they're going into, and see who I'm going to back and who's going to make it to the credits, and oh no, that guy didn't make it. And I really like that aspect, that you actually care about these characters. It's not one of those where you're waiting for them to get killed because they're annoying you. That sense of, oh, that guy's died and that's really sad, and those lads are still feeling it as they push through to try and kill all the werewolves and everything. So yeah, really like it. definitely not the best werewolf in the world. That is American Werewolf in London, but it's definitely kind of up there. No, not really a big genre though, is it? Werewolf movies. A lot of them are a little bit crap and just kind of we don't see the monster, so we just see people reacting. But yeah, a really good one.
Yeah, you're right. It's interesting that, isn't it? Because there's a lot of there's a th- you. It's one of those things where you're like, there is a lot of werewolf movies, but then also it's very difficult to think about them because they're not necessarily any good. It's like you've got the ones where they're all leather wearing vampire werewolf things with whatever her name is, who's just there just to be absolutely stunning wearing leather. And but they're just shit, and as Hollywood blockbusters as they are, they're not great. And you're right, like when it comes down to it, obviously you've got things like The Howling, which is obviously the one that's sort of up there with American Werewolf in London in regards to werewolf movie discussions, like which one's the best. Some people like The Howling more, and so on, vice versa. But I do think that there is absolutely a place, in this werewolf genre, so to speak, where we put Dog Soldiers up there at the top, like it's in as one of the best werewolf movies. Because I think it is a movie that, and I'm not talking about the stuff that is easy for me to hate because of my hatred for British people in movies, but I think there's a lot. This movie has a lot going for it in regards to the process of the creation of it. When it comes to the practical effects, it looks great. When it comes to the werewolves themselves, as we've both said, they're still to this day the best versions, on-screen versions of werewolves, the most intimidating versions of werewolves I think we've still had to this day. And they look like, even when I watched it the other day, I just thought it's just the little movements in their faces, when they're eating stuff and their way, they really did study wolves, to create the look for the movie and how they moved and stuff. And it just works. But what I like about this movie is that it isn't just like start to finish, soldiers fighting werewolves. There's more to it. There's more story. Like you're saying, the characters, as much as I find them tonally annoying, but I understand what you're saying. Like, I like the fact that you feel the loss on the team every time someone dies, like it's like you've hurt them directly by doing that to those people, and it does make you more invested in the characters and more invested in the movie. So you're exactly right. um yeah, I just think I think for me it is, and I do agree with you as well. This is a movie, so I watched it obviously the other day for prep. I hadn't watched it probably, well, since I did a guest spot on somebody else's show to talk about this movie. But then before that, I can't even remember the last time I watched it. It's not one of those movies that well, for me personally, it's not a movie that I just put on all the time and go, I'm going to watch Dog Soldiers. Mostly, once again, because of my hatred for British people in movies. But I do. What I think, for me, what I love about this movie, apart from the things I said, is the fact that it's still out there today. Like, I like the fact that people still, when people talk about werewolf movies, Dog Soldiers is still the one that people talk about, up there with the ones that we know that are actually good. I really think that Neil Marshall created something that was very different at the time. And I think that because of how different it was at the time, it means that it still works to this day, especially within British cinema, because still in British cinema, it's still pretty shit. So we're not still don't get Dog Soldiers and movies like that, and I wish we would. But yeah, so I think for me, like, one of the big things about Dog Soldiers is that I'm really happy that it's still a movie that people talk about, and like, it's still a proper like cult classic, and absolutely is one of the best werewolf movies that's ever been made. Not the best, but it's definitely one of them. But also there are a load of shit ones. So, so what can you say? Your first time, that is the segment on the show where I ask you, this horror community, or any of you out there, for you to send me over your first time horror movie memory. and I read it out on an episode. This one comes from Cinematic Nightmares. They sent it to me on Instagram, where you can find them at Cinematic Nightmares Podcast. And they put, this is from, I'm going to say this wrong, but Mecca or Mika or Micah G from Cinematic Nightmares. I apologize, it's all obviously wrong, but I'm an idiot. My first horror movie memory was watching one of those VHS tapes that had like 3 or 4 movies on them. I just finished watching Purple Rain, not a horror movie, when the old school New Line Cinema logo popped up and A Nightmare on Elm Street came on. My mum didn't know it was on, and I watched the whole movie. Part 2 came on right after that. I remember the school bus. Obviously, he doesn't remember the school bus moment, and then they watched that one too. And then, of course, from that point on, they've been hooked ever since. It's so interesting over the years of doing the show how many times Nightmare on Elm Street has been the first horror memory. I think that movie, out of any movie, has been the one that's popped up on people's first time horror movie memories. But I always like to ask my guests, Leighton, can you remember your first horror movie memory, the one that started it all?
I can, and I can go one better for you as well, BP.
Go
So
on.
for me, it was all Dawn of the Dead, and I would have been about 6 or something like that. Genuinely a weird kid watching horror from a very young age with my dad. You know, as long as my dad was watching it, what I saw wasn't scary. And it was Dawn of the Dead. Growing up in the 80s in the UK, where we didn't have shopping malls, and so this scene was like a character in itself. The whole location, and watching these 4 characters who you just loved partying right through the movie, zombies and everything. And I can go one better for you because we bought the Betamax when the VHS shop was selling them. And so that is literally the tape that we used to rent, me and my dad. And so I've still got that to this day.
Oh, how
So
cool.
that is my first time. Yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's cool. That's like a part of there's like a double history, like there's the meaning behind it and also the history of the movie and so on like that. But yeah, that's really cool. But I love this section. Like I've had it in the show even when I was doing my solo episodes when I first started, because that's what this show is all about. Is essentially us having a conversation, but it's all about you as well. And so if you want your first time horror movie memory read out on the show, all you've got to do is head over to any of the socials, or you can even comment on the YouTube video if you want to. But ideally, go on the socials, Instagram, because that's the one I might actually look at. Send me a DM and then put in as much detail as you want, just like Cinematic Nightmares sent to me as well on this, and like Leighton just mentioned. And I'll read it out on the show. Simple as that. It costs you nothing to have a little bit of fun. And then also, if you are somebody that has a first time horror movie memory and you never watched horror again and it absolutely traumatized you, I still want to know that one. Then I can laugh about it a little bit. So there we go. So that's everything in regards to Dog Soldiers. Of course, we recommend you watch the movie if you haven't. I'm sure you have by now. I mean, if you're watching or listening to this episode about Dog Soldiers, the point, the chances are what Dog Soldiers is, and I hope that you like it. Once again, this movie has, for me personally, it has a lot that can go against it. And that's one of the reasons why I love this movie more, is because there's so much that can go against this movie for me personally, that the fact that I love this movie is actually a bit of a miracle. And that's a testament to Neil Marshall and everything he created, and the cast and crew and the practical effects, everybody doing that. The werewolves, not that they're real. I can't thank the werewolves. They're not real. And also, I'd run away if they were fucking real, because they're giant, massive monster things. But yeah, it's a real testament to the creative forces behind this, that this still is a movie that I watch and still to this day really enjoy, and I'm happy that it's still out there, and I'm still happy it's considered one of the best werewolf movies there is. But now, Leighton, it is your time to promote your own podcast, the Surviving Horror Podcast. Give it the floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you. So me and one of my oldest friends from school, Danny, we co-host Surviving Horror Podcast. And what we thought we'd do is just have a fairly light-hearted look at a given horror movie each episode. So far we've done Night, Dawn and Day of the Dead, and we've done Host as a more modern one, And then we've got Gremlins coming out as our kind of Christmassy one. So that'll be 1st of December. We're also throwing in little shorts as well, where we just kind of talk for 5 minutes about a 10-minute film. And the kind of hook is, yes, we will chat shit about it and share our opinions, but we'll see if there's anything that the characters could have done differently so they might actually make it to the end credits. And then we think about how we might have survived the zombie apocalypse or an online Zoom seance with a demon in there and whatever might come, the gremlins coming to get us and things like that. So we just get to kick things around. The thing I've really realized after only 5 episodes, it's really a podcast about friendship, as me and my mate talk about stuff, happens to be through the lens of horror movies. So that's quite a nice aspect as well. We could just be talking about cars or football or something else, but we both love horror, and we know each other very well. So that comes through as well. So yeah, we drop one main episode a month on the 1st and then a kind of short thing on the 15th. Surviving Horror Podcast, and we're on Instagram too. Thanks, BP.
There we go. So there we go. So if you want another horror podcast, which obviously you should, because everybody should be trying to not only listen but also support all of us, independent horror creators. Anybody out putting out anything out there as well. So go and enjoy everything Leighton does with Surviving Horror Podcast. I'm sure you will absolutely bloody love it, because we all love all these different conversations that people are having around the horror genre, the greatest genre that there is out there, the most interesting and the most iconic genre that there is out there. If anybody else thinks that another one is more interesting, you're fucking wrong. We all know that. That's why horror is what it is. And it is everything that it is because of everybody out there, like everybody that's watching or listening to this. You people out there, this horror community are the ones creating horror, giving horror the chances that it gets, and given the chances and the opportunity it deserves. So please, as said, make sure you go and check out everything that Leighton does with Surviving Horror Podcast. Obviously, listen to it. Make sure you follow him on all the socials as well. Just support. It's not just about supporting independent horror in the cinema. It's also about supporting independent horror creators out there, horror content creators out there that truly love it. We love this genre, and I'm very lucky that I get to have conversations with people like Leighton and people all over the world that love horror. We've had very many conversations about horror outside of doing this episode and so on for a long time, and it's always great talking with people, and that's why it's called Let's Talk Horror. In regards to Let's Talk Horror, it is what it is. We're still here somehow. We're still here. We're still going. If you are watching this and you haven't subscribed, make sure you do. It's absolutely bloody free, and you get top-notch horror-related content for free. What more do you want? Like, here we go. Like, just go and enjoy it. Subscribe to it, because I get to evolve the channel and reach new audiences once again because of you. And if all of you are, if I get more people on this journey, then the show gets to go to bigger places, and that's obviously what I would love. Once again, I keep saying it every episode. People keep talking about Patreon. It'll happen at some point. Hopefully it does. It's just trying to get a few things in place with Patreon that basically there's a few technical things that I'm trying to get sorted, and they're not doing it, and it's annoying me. So I've got to try and get that sorted. But just keep being on this journey through horror with me, with Let's Talk Horror, because right now it's all about talking about movies like Dog Soldiers and like a lot of the movies that I've been covering recently, where there's so much to these movies than just A, B, and C. There's a lot more to that, and Dog Soldiers is one of those movies. There's a lot more to this movie than just werewolves and people fighting them. There's the little in-between bits that make it a long-lasting movie that people still consider to be one of the best werewolf movies there is. So once again, Leighton, thank you for coming on the Let's Talk Horror channel podcast, whatever it's fucking called, for the first time. This is the first time you've ever been on, so thank you for coming on.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Thank you.
And there we go. So for everybody else, until next time, stay creepy, fuckers.